So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Timo Peters. I am currently in Tuscany at the Center for Contemplative Research. I'm in the last week of a 3-month retreat, so I'm no longer sort of strict. I can communicate, I can do calls like this, but I haven't exactly been doing a lot of public speaking in this time, so it's a lot of faces at once. So bear with me here if it takes me a minute to adjust to so many faces. Is the audio quality okay? It should be okay. I didn't have my professional microphone. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to be doing today, we have about 90 minutes or so. It's okay if there's something coming up and you have to leave, don't worry. But it'd be great if you can join for the full 90 minutes. It will give us enough time to both talk about and actually get a direct taste of Buddhist meditation. So we're going to be doing some guided meditations together, and I'll give you some background of the practices that we're doing and also about the upcoming 12-week course. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to myself, my background, and my teachers. I think it's always important whenever someone is teaching meditation or anything like that to understand who are their teachers and where are they coming from, and are their methods time-tested, are they reliable, and so forth. So, I mean, in a nutshell, for the past 15 years or so, I've been looking for ways to reduce unnecessary suffering in life and find greater and more lasting forms of well-being. And over all those years, I really think that Buddhist meditation for me personally has been the single most effective practice that I've ever found to do that, to reduce suffering and to enhance well-being. Granted that my basic needs are met, it's really some of the greatest well-being I've ever experienced in life was while doing these practices. So for me, these are like one of my most cherished discoveries, and so I'm very glad to share them with all of you. We're going to look a little bit at why one would meditate at all, what actually motivates us to practice meditation, and talk a little bit about what the original intended outcomes of these practices were versus how they're often taught in a modern context. Yeah, so in particular, modern mindfulness is usually taught as a way to enhance the goals you already have, in a way, like reducing stress or greater productivity at work and so on. But these practices had a much more profound goal in mind for us. And so I would like to talk about that a little bit. We're going to look at 4 core practices. These are also the core of the course itself. I very much agree with my teacher, Alan Wallace, that these really are the greatest hits of the Buddhist meditative tradition. I really think that compared to other practices, these are relatively simple, relatively easy to practice, and they give quite sort of quick and profound results. And very importantly, they don't require us to accept any particular beliefs that we cannot actually test for ourselves in our own experience. So this makes them quite universal and easily accessible to people of lots of different backgrounds and worldviews. And I want to stress that I'll just show you what they are. So here, the determination to be free, which is all about meditating on the nature and causes of suffering and of happiness, and really understanding what is this suffering that we experience in life, and what is this happiness, and what is possible for us as human beings. Are we simply doomed to a life of rather unsatisfying experience, or is it possible to find a more lasting kind of fulfillment? So this is a very important practice. The second one is the 4 immeasurables. So these are 4 qualities of the heart, most importantly, loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and impartiality. So we're going to go into that during the session as well. We're going to do some guided practice of that. Serenity is my translation of shamatha. Sometimes it's called concentration practice. This is all about developing a very stilled and settled state of mind that allows us to cultivate beneficial qualities and allows us to investigate the nature of reality. much more accurately. So it's kind of a lead up to the next practice, which is insight meditation or vipashyana. This is a very sort of familiar word for a lot of people who are interested in meditation. And here I would also like to show that actually there's a lot more to this practice than is often taught in the modern versions. So, and finally, I will give you a brief outline of the course, the 12-week course coming up, and give you some opportunity to give some input as well. So, like, I, so what is it, Lucas? Is it? Oh, best translation. Yes, I agree. I agree. So, briefly here, who am I? Why would it be worth listening to anything I have to say on the subject? Um, I think it's important to mention just who my teachers were. Not that I'm so great, but my teachers were really quite excellent. And as I mentioned, it very often doesn't happen in this kind of context that people check their teachers very well. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of kind of scandals erupting in recent decades of, especially Buddhist teachers, but in all traditions, people turning out to be charlatans, some kind of unqualified, and a lot of misinformation and confusion spreading as a result. So it's always important to know where people are coming from. It started for me when I met Peter Fenner. He was my first teacher. He was a professor from Australia. Spent about 14 years as a Buddhist monk. And he came to the Netherlands for about 2 or 3 days to teach meditation. And it was quite remarkable for me what he was able to demonstrate, which was that it is actually possible for us as human beings to experience a state of consciousness that is entirely free of all suffering and all dissatisfaction. Every sense that our experience needs to be different in some way has completely vanished, and that there's a quality of fulfillment there that is kind of complete or total. I really can't imagine this experience being further improved. And yet, it didn't require any kind of change at the outer level. There wasn't anything pleasurable happening. I didn't have to remove anything unpleasant. And so that was really kind of an eye opener for me. If that's possible, then I'm completely fascinated with that and I want to know everything about this. So I was basically hooked after that for the next 15 years, practicing with many Buddhist teachers and also studying this at university. Had just been a new academic program created on the subject, so I was glad to join that in the first year and completed many courses with various teachers. I won't belabor the details here, but really quite excellent. And importantly, also received the permission to teach these practices that I'll be doing in the course and today. So just to briefly introduce you to some of these names, because you don't probably know who they are. They had the good fortune of studying with some of the most amazing teachers in Asia. So, Dr. Alan Wallace, I mentioned, he studied with Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, who was quite possibly the greatest scholar and meditation teacher in all of Sri Lanka, which is the main hub of early Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism in the world. An extraordinary person. He met him when he was retired and just living in a small temple, and he could just all the time received teachings from him and spent months training with him. He spent a lot of time with Gyatso Rinpoche. He spent many years in retreat with the Dalai Lama himself. He's a very close student of his. Dalai Lama is probably quite arguably the greatest scholar of Buddhism alive today. Many people don't know that. When he teaches in his native context in Tibetan, you can see that he's really an amazing scholar and also a highly realized meditator. I mentioned Dr. Joe Lloydso. He comes from a more psychotherapeutic background as well as a Buddhist teacher. And my main teacher, Rob Priest, for the last 15 years, spent about 5.5 years in retreat under Genjan Pawangdu and Lama Thepten Yeshi. Genjan Pawangdu spent 25 years in retreat. So I just imagine I spent 3 months and I was like, okay, that's about enough for me for now, and imagine doing 25. I'm glad I don't have to yet. So, and I mentioned Peter Fenner. He was also a very close student of Lama Yeshe. So, just to show gratitude and how grateful I am to them. So, and there's little me in the middle. So, what would motivate us to practice meditation in the first place? as I mentioned, a lot of the modern sort of approaches, the kind of meditation apps that are very popular these days, they really tend to serve the goals that we already have, right? Economic productivity, I want to sleep better. And I'm not suggesting that, those goals are not good goals to have or that you shouldn't use meditation for things like that. Of course, it's a perfectly good goal to have. But I do think it's important to recognize that originally meditation was also about questioning our goals. Yeah. Actually questioning, is this really going to give me the lasting satisfaction and fulfillment that I seek? What do we ultimately want? What is really the end point of our desires, right? So we're going to go through this in the next guided meditation. And I think if you really trace it down, what the things that you really want in your life, ultimately there's some kind of suffering that you want to reduce, and there's some kind of happiness or well-being that you want to gain. Almost everything we want can be boiled down to that. And yet rarely do we ask, what is really the nature of suffering and well-being? What are the root causes of suffering and dissatisfaction? We often assume it's outer conditions, external conditions. It's my job, it's my partner, it's there's something wrong with the political system and so forth. But is that really the cause, or is that simply the trigger? Right? So we're going to go into this. And of course, is it possible to find freedom and fulfillment? And what would be the causes of that? So those are often called the Four Noble Truths. Also, I think, unfortunate translation. It gives the impression that these are things to believe in or accept, but they're really realities to understand or to see for what they are. And so that's going to be our first meditation on the first of the Four Noble Truths. And just to give a little introduction here, it's going to be an analytical or discerning meditation, a style of meditation that's not very often taught in the West. In Tibetan, it's called Jegom. It's where you actually do use thinking and you do use analysis and investigation. You don't try to stop thinking. That's only one small part of meditation. Yeah. So you're using analysis to come to a deeper understanding and then use the mindfulness to kind of deepen that understanding, to integrate it more deeply into the mind. Yeah. So let's try it out. Let's do it. And so if you are comfortable, please find a comfortable position for meditation. If you're sitting on a chair, it's perfectly okay. If you can have your back roughly straight, not leaning against a support, that's usually the most important. And simply that you're comfortable. And if it makes you more comfortable, you can also close your camera. And so as we begin, I invite you to cultivate a sense of positive motivation for doing this practice. Just 10 minutes, won't be too long. Just to become aware that we're doing this to develop beneficial qualities of the mind, to enable us to find true well-being, and to help us bring well-being also to others, to as many beings as possible. So with that sense of motivation, I invite you to become aware of the sensations of breathing in your body. As the breath naturally comes in and out, to simply rest your mind on the tactile sensations in your belly or your nostrils, wherever you feel the breath most clearly. To simply remain aware of those sensations, moment by moment. And with every natural exhale, to release any unnecessary tension in your body and your mind. releasing tension in your forehead, in your neck, your jaw, shoulders. Really let yourself sink into the chair you're sitting on. Really relax your mind. When your mind feels somewhat stable and relaxed, I'd like you to bring your attention to the day you had yesterday. And see if you can bring to mind, vividly imagine how much of the time yesterday was your experience unpleasant. There was some kind of suffering present. It can be all the way from very subtle to more intense. See if you can bring to mind those moments when your experience was unpleasant. See if you can notice the character of that experience. What is it like? What is the kind of suffering that you experience the most? See if you can bring a compassionate attitude to that. A sense of, may I be free from this suffering. As you bring to mind these different moments, maybe from the past week, how much of the time is there some sense of unpleasantness in your experience? And again, bring that compassionate attitude. May I be free from suffering. Then I would like you to bring to mind in the last day or the last week or so, those times when you felt a sense of, my experience is pleasant, sense of happiness. It can be short moments or longer duration, whatever stands out to you. What was it like when it was pleasant? As you vividly imagine this, how long did it really last, this happiness? How soon did it end? And then see if you can become aware. Did that happiness actually satisfy you? Or did it increase your craving for more and better experiences? Really vividly imagine it, how it was. And see if you can then also be aware. Imagine that the trigger of this happiness, whatever it was, maybe you're watching a movie, you were talking with a friend. Imagine that that cause of your happiness, that trigger, you had to experience it for 12 hours straight. Would it still give you happiness? Or would it actually start to become a source of suffering? Is it then really a cause of happiness? And then slowly, as we come to the close of this short little taste of this practice, maybe we can sort of dedicate whatever positive qualities we develop with this practice. Might enable us to kind of awaken to our full potential, to be of benefit to many others. We all have true well-being. So just a moment here, just sort of checking with you if that was okay, if that was, of course, it's only 10 minutes. I can only fit so much into our session today, but I hope it gives you a little flavor for the kind of practice this is. Anybody feels the desire to just mention very briefly what that was like for them, feel free to unmute and say something.
I can say something.
Please.
I felt quite uncomfortable that really nice people, friends, family who I feel I enjoy was being questioned. Although I do understand that if it went, if certain scenarios went on a long time, it could become less perfect.
Right.
But I am lucky to have lovely people in my life, and that's what I enjoy and what came to mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Sue. And Of course, if we had more time, I could unpack. And of course, what you're saying is very true. I didn't want to imply that that means that the things that bring us happiness are not really valuable or not really, giving us happiness. Surely they do. Um, as we're going to see in the next few slides, it's an interesting question of what makes it that it gives us happiness, right? For example, the same person, you may find them a source of happiness for you, and someone else may not really like that same person, right? And so I think it's interesting to investigate where is the happiness really coming from, and is it the quality that we are bringing to the situation, right? How we are aware of this person, we love them, we care about them, and that this is playing a role in how the happiness is arising, and that if this person alone could cause happiness, could bring us happiness, then they would cause happiness for absolutely everybody, in a sense, right? And so it's always what are we bringing to the situation, and how is that affecting our happiness? So thank you for that, and of course, there's a lot more to unpack here. So thank you, Lucas.
It was a great meditation for me. I think I have never done exactly like this, contemplating specific experiences of unpleasant and pleasant. And I curiously remembered once I was 15 years old, I was with my father, and he invited one friend of him and we had dinner together. And his friend of my father, he was of a building company, and he said he was the owner, and he said sincerely that he really thought that all his employees were happier than him, he said.
Mm.
And that was remarkable for me, trying to understand why he thinks like this. And he said that because he started to gain money and sophisticate more his pleasures,
Mm.
he was used to not be happy anymore, while his employees were always happy with almost nothing, you know.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
it was amazing to see how in the moment that we have a good experience, we produce attachment and we want more of that, like we are
Mm.
planting seeds of our own unhappiness in that right moment, wanting
Mm.
more. So that was
Exactly.
the reflection for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. How do we respond when something pleasant arises? That's very much what I would like to talk about next. What are the causes, right? What are the causes of suffering and dissatisfaction? And as I mentioned, we tend to think that they are external. They're outside of ourselves. Yeah, in Buddhism, they're called the eight transitory concerns, sometimes called worldly concerns. But the word is jigden in Tibetan. It simply means transitory. And so, external pleasure and pain, pleasant stimuli, unpleasant stimuli, material wealth, like you said, Lucas, right? Material loss, praise and criticism, and good reputation and bad reputation. And it becomes really interesting when you ask, how much of the time are we seeking these first four, really expecting these things are going to give us not just temporary happiness, but something that's actually going to last, right? If only I can just get enough of this. If only I can just get the right this. If only I can get praise from my partner. If only I can, and so forth and so on. And also that these other four, the pain, the loss, the criticism, the reputation, can by themselves give us unhappiness, independent of anything else, right? And so I invite you to do a little thought experiment here. Imagine someone who has lots of pleasure, lots of material gain, lots of praise, lots of reputation, and yet they are still unhappy. right? I think it's not very difficult to imagine such a person. I mean, many people come to mind for me, many celebrities, and of course, it's very sad that people who have everything in this sense can still really be quite unhappy, and we have so many examples. People quite depressed, even committing suicide, great celebrities, and so forth. And on the other side, imagine someone who's suffering from some sort of chronic illness. They're quite poor, they receive a lot of criticism, and they even have a kind of bad reputation. People have some preconceptions about them, and yet they're still fulfilled. They're still quite content inside. I think we can imagine such a person, isn't it? Of course, it's difficult, and these things can, be very difficult to deal with. And for many people, they do cause suffering. But if these things by themselves, these external things by themselves, were the cause of suffering, then no one experiencing pain or poverty, criticism, and bad reputation could ever be free from mental suffering, right? Because they're the cause. And so I just also want to share a very short story of an amazing person I met in Arizona. I did volunteering for 2 months at a retreat center there of a Tibetan Lama. He spent 20 years in Chinese concentration camp. So, as many of you probably know, 1959, the Chinese invaded Tibet, destroyed most of the 6,000 monasteries, killed God knows how many people. And in particular, they took the main spiritual teachers of the country, the great lamas, they put them all in the same jail, the lamas' jail. And this is where this teacher was for 20 years of his life he spent there. And every single day he was tortured, he was starved, his family was killed, his monastery destroyed, everything was taken from him. All these causes of suffering were there. And yet what he decided eventually was that he wasn't going to let this make him suffer. He decided to use his time in the prison to develop his inner qualities. And in particular, he spent a lot of time practicing the 4 immeasurables, the practice we're going to do next, developing compassion and loving kindness, and especially not just for the people suffering with him in the prison, but actually especially for the people who are harming him. Really realizing these people are confused. They are driven by hatred and anger. And this is actually a very sad state of affairs. So I have compassion for them. And he was developing this for 20 years. And so at the end of this, after 20 years, he came out of the prison. And people who have known him for decades have told me there, I spoke to many of them, also met him in person. He was quite probably the happiest person I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. I mean, just radiantly happy. And it wasn't just, now many decades later, but also when he just came out of the prison, people who knew him for that long. I mean, that really should be impossible, right? If these external things are really the causes of our suffering, how is this possible, right? So what I'm suggesting here is that a lot of our suffering, maybe most of our suffering and our well-being, is not so much caused by what we experience, but rather by how we experience it, how we relate to what happens to us. And so that is very much, I think, what you find in most contemplative traditions of the world, not just in Buddhism, but the ancient Greeks and the Christians and the Sufis and the Taoists. They all say that there is a kind of stimulus-independent well-being, a well-being that doesn't depend on external circumstances, what the Greeks called eudaimonia, what in Sanskrit is called samyak sukha, and that this is really the goal of practicing meditation. This is why we practice. And so, just to give you a very brief introduction here of what, in Buddhist psychology, what these causes of suffering are, very famously, the 3 poisons. I love this image. Attachment. Lucas already mentioned it, that whenever we have anything pleasant, we immediately respond by clinging to it for dear life. We want to hold on to it for longer. We want more of the same. And we crave things we don't have yet, thinking they're going to make us totally happy. And of course, aversion and anger, how we react to unpleasant stimuli. Something unpleasant happened, we want to get rid of it. We want to eliminate it from our experience, and we think that that is going to prevent all suffering. And from a Buddhist point of view, fundamentally, these two are rooted in ignorance, in a kind of misperception of reality. That we perceive things that are constantly changing as if they could be unchanging. Right? If I can just hold on to my pleasure, I can stay happy. But of course, the pleasure is impermanent. It's going to change. We cannot hold on to things. And, seeing things that cannot actually give us true satisfaction as if they could give us this satisfaction. And so, on the flip side, then, the causes of well-being, from a Buddhist point of view, are really the antidotes to the causes of suffering. So, non-attachment is actually a cause of well-being from a Buddhist point of view, right? And this is not a kind of, indifference. It's actually being very relaxed and easygoing about pleasure. Whenever some kind of pleasure arises, we can enjoy it, it's fine. And when it ends, it ends. And we don't then suffer because we kept clinging on to it. And so this is actually why we practice the determination to be free, the first practice we did. Of course, we only did the first part of it, but this is really to develop that mental process of non-attachment. And when it comes to aversion, the antidote is love and compassion. So these are the 4 immeasurables, the second meditation we're going to do. And then the third, with ignorance, the antidote is serenity and wisdom. In other words, insight meditation, the other 2 meditations we would do after that. So you can see that each of the 4 practices that we do today and also in the course are really designed to cultivate the inner causes of well-being that also are the antidotes to the inner causes of suffering. Right? So there's a whole psychology behind this. And what I love very much about this image is that the 3 animals, they represent these 3, right? So the rooster is attachment, because we've all seen roosters. They think they're wonderful. They're very they think they're great. And the snake is anger, strikes suddenly, right? We get annoyed with somebody, acts like a snake. And the pig, who eats anything without any discrimination, right? So this is kind of like ignorance, symbolically. So I just love this. I love this image. And of course, at the risk of seeming oversimplifying, there's a much more sophisticated psychology here. And in the course, we would have time to unpack that. We don't have time for that today. But just to show you, there's like 20 subdivisions, secondary causes of suffering. Within attachment, there's miserliness and restlessness and pretension and so forth. And within anger, there's also resentment and jealousy and so forth. But when you attack the root cause of the problem, the root cause of suffering, all of these can be resolved. That is at least the Buddhist hypothesis. That is what we can test for ourselves as we do these practices. So then I'll tell you a little bit about the 4 immeasurables, and we're going to do another short guided meditation. For those of you who are not familiar, the 4 immeasurables are, as I mentioned, loving kindness is the first one. And this is simply the wish that we ourselves and other sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And the happiness in this deeper sense, right, of the inner kind of true happiness and well-being that we're all looking for. And what's very interesting is that in the Buddhist psychology, there's an understanding that there are certain states of mind that are very easy to confuse for the real thing. They're called the near enemy. So the near enemy of loving kindness would be self-centered attachment. I'm sure we've all experienced this when you hear people say to each other, I love you so much. Oh, I really love you. And you feel this is really something else also, right? There's also a sense of, I need you to make me happy, for example, right? So this is getting a little bit mixed with something else. And actually, the loving kindness is just the wish, may you be happy, right? And so the bodyguard is the analogy that's used. The bodyguard that can protect us from this near enemy would be impartiality. So recognizing that this person, like ourselves, also wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. All people are the same in that way, right? And not to forget that when we become too attached to just our own happiness, right? And the second is compassion, the wish for others to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And the near enemy that can creep in there is just a sense of deep sadness, right? And I think a lot of us experience this. We look out at the world, we see terrible things happening, people mistreating each other in almost horrible ways, and we become just so sad. And you hear people say things sometimes like, "I'm too compassionate. It's not good for me. It just makes me so sad, and I should be less compassionate almost because it's too difficult for me." But actually, if we look at the neuroscience research on this, real compassion doesn't really have that effect. There's a big difference between feeling the suffering of another person with empathy, just feeling their pain, and compassion, which is the wish to alleviate that suffering, the wish to alleviate that pain. And so you can actually see in the brain that when we just have empathy, we just feel the pain centers in the brain are activating. We're just suffering along with them. But when we have this compassion, the wish to do something about it, then you can see the pleasure centers activating. And so it feels pleasant to have compassion for someone. And there's no such thing as too much compassion in that sense. And so, for example, you see that nurses who do these kind of practices actually have less burnout, for example, on the work floor, things like that. So it's actually wonderful. And the bodyguard that can protect us against this near enemy is empathetic joy, which is the third quality. And that is simply to recognize the happiness that other beings experience and to rejoice in the happiness that is there in the world. There is a lot of happiness in the world, and it's important to not lose sight of that by focusing too much just on the suffering, right? So that's empathetic joy. And of course, rejoicing in other people's happiness can also become a little bit superficial in a sense. This is the near enemy of almost, somebody makes a lot of money. Yeah, I'm happy for you, but sometimes losing sight a little bit of, is that really the happiness that they're looking for that's going to fulfill them, is going to give them satisfaction ultimately? And so the bodyguard that can protect against that is the loving kindness that recognizes the true nature of happiness, right? And wishing that happiness for them. And then finally, impartiality. I already mentioned it. This kind of more even-mindedness, recognizing that everybody, all human beings, and you could argue even all sentient beings, all animals, we don't want to suffer. We want to experience happiness. We're all the same in that way. And why should our happiness be more important than the happiness of the next person, even though we don't know them, right? And so there are meditations that you would do to develop all of these qualities. Of course, the near enemy of that could be a kind of aloof indifference. Just kind of don't care equally about everybody. And that's, of course, not what we're looking for. So the bodyguard that can protect against that is the compassion that recognizes there's very real suffering in the world. Yeah? And you want to connect with that real suffering. Don't become disconnected and think that that is impartiality. So I would like to do a little practice here together of this. And this comes from the Tibetan tradition. It's a practice called giving and taking, or tong-len, where you combine all of these together, right? So if it's a little bit, maybe you feel it's a bit much, I hope to do it in a simple way, but just to show you how these can fit together in a wonderful way, and so you can have a taste. So if you can find a comfortable posture as you were sitting before, you can again turn off your camera if that makes you more comfortable. And once again, you can either close your eyes or keep them slightly open as you feel comfortable. And again, developing that sense of motivation. May we develop these good qualities of the mind, these inner causes of happiness, for our own sake, but also so that we can bring happiness to others, true well-being to others. And as you relax again, become aware of your natural sensations of breathing in the body. Wherever you feel them most clearly. And rest your mind there. Let yourself really sink into your body. With every exhale, releasing tension again, and tension in the body or the mind. And maintaining that sense of continuity as the breath moves in and out. To be aware of the beginning, the middle, and the end of each breath. Then I would like you to imagine the space in front of you, a person that you care about very much. You have a good relationship with this person. Maybe you don't get a very clear visual image, that's fine. Simply feel their presence very clearly, as if they're sitting right in front of you. Now see if you can tune into the particular kind of suffering that this person tends to experience in their life. And really, with a sense of empathy, how wonderful would it be if they were free of this suffering? As you inhale, you can imagine that the suffering of this person is almost like a kind of smoke, a smoke that fills their whole body and mind and troubles them. You can imagine it in the center of your heart. There's a small orb of white light, a light of love and compassion. And that every time you inhale, you imagine inhaling that smoke, taking that smoke away from them and dissolving it into that orb of light in your heart. Really with a sense, may you be free from this suffering. Each time the natural inhale comes, imagine breathing in that smoke with the sense, may you be free from this suffering. And really have a sense that that suffering completely dissolves. There's not a trace of it left as it absorbs into this warm light in your heart, this compassion. And see if you can then tune into the happiness that this person most deeply yearns for, the happiness they seek in their heart of hearts. And how wonderful it would be if they could experience this happiness. And this time in the opposite direction, imagine that from that light in your heart flows out a warm white light of happiness, true happiness. And you breathe it out in their direction and it fills their body and mind. Imagine them really experiencing that happiness. And you can say within in your mind, may you be happy each time you exhale. May you be well. And then gradually you can come back to the session. And just briefly dedicate, we can dedicate whatever positive quality, this love and compassion that we've been developing. May it act as a cause for us to experience genuine happiness and freedom from suffering, so that we can bring that happiness and freedom from suffering to so many others. So if there's anybody who feels the impulse to just say very briefly, just one or two sentences, just what that's like for you, feel free to unmute and
Yeah, that was actually quite powerful for me. So I've not done loving kindness in years, and now I understood why it stopped working for me. Because those
Mm,
words of "may you be happy" or like "may you find joy," it makes it very intellectual, and I'm not connected with it anymore.
mm,
When you took us through imagining, it's like, oh, this is powerful. I feel this like really strong love. It was
mm.
especially the thing of flipping it and imagining like what's the most deep happiness someone else could, like in their heart of hearts. It's like,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, I get that. And then
nice.
it was simple. But then the moment you added that intellectual thing, I saw, oh, now it dwindles. So I
Mm.
understand what it is that works for me in that moment. So I think you might have just unlocked love and kindness for me again.
That's great, man. Good to hear you, Jonas. I missed you.
Yeah, you too, man.
That's lovely. Yeah, it's so interesting how different things can work for different people. I've also heard from people who say, "Oh, the light, it makes it so complicated. I can't visualize and it takes me out of it completely." But for some people, that's exactly what kind of makes them, whatever makes you feel it, right? And that's what it's about. Great. So, unless anybody else has something to add here, then we can go to the next one. Oh, yeah, forgot to mention what we would also be doing in the course is actually there's a kind of final step to this, which is not very often taught. I mean, in the Mahayana context in Buddhism, it is taught of bodhicitta. So you may have noticed that with all of these practices up to now, it was the aspiration, the wish, the desire. May you have happiness and the causes of happiness and so forth. But in the final step, it becomes an intention. It becomes you are taking responsibility and saying, I will do it. I will bring you happiness. I will free you from suffering. I will do whatever I can to benefit you. Yeah, this is really this kind of in Tibetan, the connotation of this is almost like a heroic attitude, of I'm going to take responsibility. I will do it. This is very powerful, and of course, something you work up to. So then, briefly, I want to show you a lovely painting also here to explain the serenity practice. So, as I mentioned, this practice, shamatha, often gets framed as a way to develop concentration, right? And I think concentration has this very unfortunate feeling about it that you are focusing and contracting, and there's a lot of effort involved. And as Lucas mentioned, serenity has exactly the right connotation. It's really a state of mind that is very still and settled and is very relaxed. And because it's so relaxed, it's also very, very stable. And we can sustain our attention on any given object for as long as we want, precisely because the mind is so relaxed. And this was really a key that for many of my teachers unlocked this practice, because for many people, they struggle with it because they get too much into a striving, squeezing, tightening energy with it. And so, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to have a state of mind that is very still and settled? As I mentioned before, it's to be able to sustain and develop these other beneficial qualities that contribute to happiness, such as the love and kindness, such as the compassion. Because as you may have noticed, the mind is very prone to distraction. You're trying to do this, you're trying to imagine this person and wishing them happiness, and you start thinking about your grocery list or whatever. And okay, well, then it's not really going to work. But most importantly, this practice is a preparation for the next meditation of insight, vipashyana. We need a state of mind that is very stable and still to be able to investigate reality, right? So my favorite analogy with this is that it's like a telescope. Our mind, when it's completely untamed and it's all over the place, we can't actually perceive things very accurately. If you want to observe the stars, you need a telescope that is stable, doesn't move around. You have to have a clean lens You have to have some clarity and so forth. And so this is really the purpose of doing this kind of practice. And so what you see on the image here on the right, the infographic, this is an ancient Indian infographic, okay? It's very cool to see how they designed these. In the image below, you can see a small elephant, a black elephant. And this represents the mind, right? This is the untamed mind. And the little monkey in front of it is distraction, our tendency to be pulled away towards pleasurable and interesting objects. And the monk running after it is yourself. You're the meditator. You're trying to tame your mind, right? And so gradually, over the course of 9 stages, you begin to tame this elephant. And this elephant, you don't tame it by forcing it, right? You don't muscle it down. You gradually befriend it and you calm it down. And so over time, the monkey is less in charge, and you see a little rabbit emerging, and that is the rabbit of dullness, right? So this becomes a more subtle obstacle. And it's just to show you that this whole process of training the attention has been mapped out in a level of detail that I think is unprecedented in most of the world's traditions. And it's definitely in modern psychology, there's nothing like this. How do you train the attention in a systematic way? And telling you exactly at this point, this kind of obstacle would arise and you'd use this kind of antidote to deal with it and so forth. And also really a vision that is extraordinary of our potential of the human mind, because as you go through this process, you can gradually, this is very attainable for people like you and me, or have busy lives and don't have a tremendous amount of time for meditation. You can get to a point where you can meditate for 30 minutes and not get distracted at all from your object. That's perfectly achievable for ordinary people like ourselves. But the top image here at the top of the 9 stages, that is called achieving shamatha. And that entails that you are capable of meditating on a single object, let's say the breath or a visualized image or something, for roughly 4 hours with no distraction and no dullness. And I know that sounds fantastical and somewhat, do I believe that? There really are people today who are able to do that, and they're increasingly being studied by science as well. So the place where I'm currently staying, the Center for Contemplative Research, are actually training people to do this and are doing increasingly collaborative research with neuroscientists to see what happens in the brain when people go through this kind of training. But we don't have to go to such extremes. It's extremely valuable to do this kind of practice in a daily life setting. And so that's why it's really important to include it here. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do a little guided meditation on this one, because I really want to get to the insight practice. So it will have to be part of the course. And actually, some of what we've been doing in the beginning of each practice, of settling and releasing tension, that is the beginning part of Serenity or shamatha practice. And I think this practice is most familiar if anyone has ever done meditation or used a meditation app. A lot of the mindfulness type meditation is sort of this kind of practice, although here there's a lot more to it, because there's a lot more detail about the antidotes and the kind of obstacles that arise. So we're going to have to keep that for the course, unfortunately, because we don't have enough time. Maybe if we have enough time at the end. This is the most important practice. I'm glad if you're still here, if you're still awake. I'm also checking in with people if people feel they need a very short break, maybe to go to the toilet or something like that. Just checking in with people. How's energy level? I see thumbs up. I see a lot of cameras off, so I don't know. Thumbs up. Okay. I'm going to take that as good sign. Okay. So then, insight meditation. As I mentioned, this is vipashyana. And that's a kind of a famous term these days. There's a modern vipassana movement. There's a lot of 10-day vipassana retreats being held. And vipassana literally means extraordinary seeing in Sanskrit. And so what you're doing in this practice is applying the mindfulness that you've been developing in the previous practice, Serenity practice, and other practices, to actually investigating reality. And most importantly, investigating the reality of experience and the reality of the self. Yeah. So, unfortunately, in the sort of more modern versions of Vipassana, very often this practice is taught as Vipassana simply means bare attention. You pay attention to an object, whatever arises in consciousness, with no judgment and no distraction. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And as I think my teacher Alan Wallace likes to say, this is missing maybe 80% of what this is about. Vipassana originally always entails investigation, posing questions, actually investigating. Because in order to see reality as it is, we have to overcome our tendency for ignorance, which is to superimpose, project things onto reality that simply aren't there. And we need to use questioning to kind of pierce through that illusion. And so the kind of reality we're investigating here is not the kind of objective third person perspective on reality, which you would find in science, but reality from the first person point of view. So really reality from the subjective perspective, which is ultimately what matters in our lives, right? And so these are mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of phenomena. So again, applying mindfulness to the nature of the body. And what is the body in this case? The body is the direct experience of the five senses. So you would observe very closely with this mindfulness you've been developing the nature of visual perception, the nature of tactile sensations, the nature of sound, the nature of smell, and so forth. And in a very particular way. In the Theravada context, you're investigating the impermanent nature of phenomena, the unsatisfactory nature of phenomena, and the selflessness of phenomena. So we're going to do a little guided practice here. I'll introduce you to a little bit of this. But of course, this is the deepest practice. So this would require the most unpacking, and I can only give you a very brief sort of opening of the box here. And then in the Mahayana context, you would investigate the emptiness of all phenomena, the emptiness of inherent existence. And so what I would like to do for us is that we're going to do a little session of the mindfulness of the body and actually investigating what is, well, in particular, the impermanence of tactile sensations in the body and the selflessness of them, right? So I'll guide you through it. If you would like to take a comfortable position, once again. So you can again close your eyes or keep them slightly open, whichever is most comfortable to you. And for a moment, just to reflect on the motivation. Let's do this practice together to develop insight, to develop this wisdom of seeing reality as it is, in order to find genuine happiness and well-being for ourselves and for all others. I'd like you to become aware, as before, of the natural sensations of the breath as they arise, and wherever you feel them most clearly. To simply rest your mind in the whole field of tactile sensations in the body. All the little tinglings and vibrations that you can feel throughout the entire body. both on the surface of the skin, but also inside the body. And as before, with each exhale, really relaxing and releasing tension. Letting your body come to a natural state of rest. And I would like you to become aware in this whole field of tactile sensations throughout the whole body, almost like a cloud of sensation. See if you can be aware of this whole field of sensations in the body with a very spacious awareness, very open, wide open, like the sky. And with a sense of curiosity, of interest, being aware of every little subtle movement, every little sensation throughout your body. And as you stabilize your attention there on these sensations, see if you can investigate them slightly. Simply ask yourself the question, are they changing or are they unchanging? And you're not asking this question to think about it or to come up with an intellectual answer. You're observing very closely, like a scientist looking through a microscope, to be very still and attentive, simply observing the behavior of these sensations. Can you find any sensation that is unchanging? If you lose your sense of focus, just notice and relax. Release whatever was distracting you and come back to all this field of tactile sensations. Be as intimate as you can. All these sensations in your body. Can you find any that is unchanging? And then perhaps within this space, you have a sense that your sense of self is located somewhere in particular in this space of your body. Some of us feel we are more in our head. Some it's more feel that we are in our heart. See if you can observe in this whole field of tactile sensations, are any of these sensations me? Is any of these sensations a kind of stable, unchanging me? Look closely. If you find something that kind of feels like it's me, does it change? Is it moving? Or is it stable enough that it can really be me? And so then slowly you can come back to the room. Just for a moment, just sort of dedicating whatever little insight we've developed with this practice may act as a cause for us to experience genuine happiness and bring genuine happiness to many others. Okay. And again, I just want to give you an opportunity for a moment. If anybody wants to just mention very briefly what that was like, if it, yeah, what came up for you?
I thought it was interesting the use of the word field. You use the word field and the word spaciousness, which both helped me a lot to not go towards the sensation, but to simply be aware of them. And I didn't need to identify with them. So within a very short period of time, I felt I was really dissolving this sense of the receiver of all these tactile sensations being the me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a great experience.
And it sounds like it was pleasant, right?
Very.
And not, it can, I think when you first maybe get introduced to this idea, sense of self dissolving, it can also maybe sound a little bit scary, I think for some people when they hear it for the first time, it's, It sounds a bit unsettling, but I think it's important to mention here that the sense of self that we're looking for here is a sense of self that is solid and unchanging, right? That is a kind of separate thing. And so we're not saying, of course, that you don't exist. We're not saying anything like that. But the sense of self that we often experience in daily life, right? Especially when we get triggered, when anything happens, we tend to solidify and becomes a very solid, stable, separate kind of self. And so that is precisely the self that we're looking for. And to discover that it's not actually as solid as you think can be quite a relief, actually, right? So I just want to mention that in case anybody had a sense of, that sounds a bit unsettling for me, you know? So I can assure you it's a huge relief. The more this kind of experience can happen for you, it's a huge relief. I don't have to keep up this solid me. So then very briefly here, we have about 8 minutes left. And so what I would like to take you through very briefly is just a quick outline of the course. I'm going to see if I can actually get the course page up here. Let me see if I can stop sharing and then. Oh, can you see it? Oh, wait. Can you see the website at this moment? Yeah?
Yes.
Perfect. So I just wanted to show you that the 12-week course I've been telling you about, the page was finished. And so, maybe today you felt that was a lot in a short amount of time. And there was a lot to squeeze in. I wanted to give just a taste, just a kind of initial little introduction, a taster. And in the course that I'll be offering, which will start in January, we would have 12 weeks to kind of really unpack each of these practices step by step, slowly. And so I just want to show you, so the webinar will be posted here when I post it on YouTube. You can read this at your leisure. I will send this to you later. But just to show you here the format. Yeah, so can you read this text? Is it okay? Okay, perfect. So as I mentioned, it would begin on Thursday, January the 8th at about 6 p.m. Universal Time. That's about 7 p.m. Dutch time. After the holidays, it would be held over 12 weekly meetings of about 90 minutes every Thursday evening. And every session will be recorded. So if there's a time when you can't join, then you can always listen back. I will give you access to a whole bunch of guided meditations of various lengths, all the way from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, so that you can try to implement this for yourself in daily life. You can bring them on your phone, you can do them anywhere. And roughly speaking, every session would consist of relatively short talk, about 30 minutes or so, about the practice we'll be learning that week and the underlying philosophy and psychology. I intentionally don't want to make it like lecture heavy. That's not the intention. This is not a theoretical course. This would really be practice, right? So do a few guided meditations. Ideally, we would start with about 2 sessions of 15 minutes at first. 15 minutes seems to be a very good starting point for a lot of people, with a short break in between. And then over the weeks, we would sort of slowly increase that to the point where you can eventually do a single 30-minute session. But of course, in your own daily practice, it's completely up to you. There's no sense that you have to do it a certain way. If you want to do 5 minutes a day, that would be great. That would be perfect. So every session will also include some group Q&A and breakout discussions about the practices to really also see how is it affecting us, right? So not just learning it and doing it by yourself, but actually getting some feedback from other people. Like, this is what's happening for me when I do this. What's happening for you, and how can we help each other in that? And very importantly, I think some exercises and tools to help you actually establish a daily meditation habit based on evidence-based behavior change principles. I've seen this over so many years, over the last 15 years. It's so common to attend a meditation event like a retreat or a course, and then the moment it's over, it all collapses and you just don't maintain your practice. And it's been a frustration of myself for so many years, and I've finally come to find sort of some ways of actually developing a habit that isn't forced, and you don't have to use all sorts of strange manipulations and tricks on yourself, but it's really kind of inwardly driven, sort of values-based motivation to do this. And very importantly, the course would not require any reading or preparation prior to sessions, also because in my experience that simply doesn't happen. People just don't do it. So it's better off just to, I'll give you a talk, and I will suggest optional readings in case people want to do some reading. So here we would have, roughly speaking, the outline of the sessions. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but you can see the first 3 sessions or so would be focused on the first practice we did, determination to be free. Then the next 3 sessions would be on the 4 immeasurables. Then the next 3 on shamatha or serenity. And the final 3 sessions on insight. And there's a little bonus at the end, the great perfection or dzogchen, which is arguably the most amazing form of meditation out there. And I can't not include it in a course like this. I mean, it has to be there for those of you who are familiar and those of you who are not familiar. It's the highest practice in Tibetan Buddhism, and it fits perfectly at the end. You'll be well prepared to receive that. So, yeah, as I mentioned, the materials you'll receive, I already went through that. And so just a word about pricing here, because as a working man, there is a price involved simply because of the cost of preparing and running the course. The price I currently put it at is really the lowest I can go at this time. You'll receive about 12 sessions of 90 minutes, which is about 18 hours total. So that comes out to about 13 euros per hour, roughly speaking, which is about Dutch minimum wage. So that's, I think, quite reasonable. And importantly, 10% of that amount will go to charity. I'm very excited about doing this. And so about 10% will go to the most cost-effective mental health charity in the world, which is Strong Minds. Really an amazing organization. They provide highly effective group-based psychotherapy in sub-Saharan Africa for people who cannot have access to any mental health care. So it's really a wonderful initiative. And before you feel disheartened, maybe you are currently at a point in your life where you're just not in a financial situation where you can pay for this. And that's absolutely not a problem. So I have a scholarship option. If you're just currently unable to or unwilling to pay the regular price, I would say absolutely, if you feel this is valuable for you, do join. I would rather have you join than not join. Just join for free. And you can always join, make a small donation if you would like to, but that's absolutely optional. I never want money to be the reason that you cannot have access to this. It's really important to me. And so yeah, all I would ask is that you leave a little review at the end if you enjoyed it, and maybe a short testimonial when you finish. So I will send this page to you so you can take a look at it and think about it in your own time. And just briefly here, let me go back to my slides. Sorry. This should be, can you see the slide? Yeah, okay. So of course you don't need to know yet whether you want to join or not, but signups are going to close on Thursday next week. So just so you know that, you have about a week to think about it and take your time. And please do feel free to email me on the website. At the bottom, there's a little email. You can always contact me if you like. And there's only one question I would have for you. If you were to join, even though you may not have decided yet, which evenings of the week are possible for you? So it would be held on a Thursday, as I mentioned, Thursday evenings. But I just want to get a sense of people who are here. Maybe people can just sort of do a show of hands, if that's okay. And sort of Thursday evening, for how many people would that be possible? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see about 6. Okay. How about Friday evening? 2, 3. Less people. That's what I thought. Friday evening is no bueno. I get it. I'm going to include it just for the sake of interest. Saturday morning. Sometimes that's really great for people. But weekends, no, that's what I thought. No. Let's not do weekends. I agree. Monday evening. I see 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5. Tuesday evening. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then Wednesday evening. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Definitely seems that Thursday is the best day. I will check. There are a lot more people who signed up today who couldn't be there in person, so they'll be watching afterwards. So also check with all of them, but it seems for now, Thursday seems to be good. So then I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I went a little bit over time. Sorry for that. There was so much to get through. As you can tell, I really love this stuff, and so it's always difficult when you have to make decisions. What do I leave out? What do I leave in? Oh goodness! But I hoped you enjoyed it. So I will be here for a few more minutes if you would like to ask anything or say anything. So otherwise, feel free to go. And thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Timo.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
It was lovely.
Thank you very much.
Bedankt, Timo.
Thank you. Thank you.